to learn to live a life that is overflowing with victory and empowerment? Welcome to Conversations with Dr. Lane. Dr. Lane is a board-certified obstetrician and gynecologist. She is committed to addressing health holistically from the mind, body, and soul.
Hi, this is Dr. Anthereca E with Conversations with Dr. Lane. Let's talk about those things that we do not have time to discuss during an appointment. Let's talk about your finances, business, education, relationships. If I can empower you to make healthy decisions in these areas, I am convinced your mind will be more focused and more open to a conversation about your health.
Turn up the volume. Get ready for Conversations with Dr. Lane.
Hello, this is Dr. Anthereca E with Conversations with Dr. Lane. Today we have another exciting guest, Dr. James Kelly. Dr. Kelly is a clinical psychologist and has been in practice in Cincinnati, Ohio for the past 36 years. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree from the Union Institute and University. Dr. Kelly's training and practice overall emphasize how Christianity can be effectively applied to social and emotional development to improve adjustment, mental illness, self-esteem, and identity. He has several areas of particular interest in his practice, including mental and emotional illnesses' impact on education, working through trauma, disorders of childhood adolescence, as well as structural and strategic marital and family therapy. Dr. James Kelly, welcome to Conversations with Dr. Lane. Hello, this is Dr. Anthereca E with Conversations with Dr. Lane. Today we have another exciting show for you today. Today we are talking to our guest, Dr. James Kelly. Dr. James Kelly is a psychologist, and we are going to discuss a very important topic that impacts many of our lives, and that is the topic of marriage. Let's bring on Dr. Kelly. Hello, Dr. Kelly. How are you today?
Hello. Thank you very much for having me.
It's so wonderful that you've taken time to join Conversations with Dr. Lane. I'm looking forward to starting this conversation. I want to start our show a little different today. I have been thinking about asking my guest a question, and that question is, when did you know that you are powerful? One of my goals of my show is to encourage everyone to live a life that's full of victory and empowerment. And I often think about, when did I know that I was powerful or full of power? And I think one of the ways that I knew that I was powerful is through the use of creativity. A lot of times when in my career, in my education, when you pursue science, there's a very strict, rigid way that you should pursue that discipline. And I often felt stifled because there was this creative part of me. And I went to, and really not luckily, I think it was God's plan. I went to a school called Crossroads School for the Arts and Sciences. And I think that's really interesting that my parents chose a school that really merged the idea of arts and sciences. And I had exposure to a lot of creative individuals. But even during that time, I chose the science track, and I was not able to really pursue that creativity. But now that I'm older, I've really been able to develop that creativity, and it really makes me feel powerful, from the sense of creativity is such a very meaningful way to share yourself with others. It's a way to become vulnerable and to really impact the lives of others. So I'd like to ask you, when did you realize that you are powerful?
Good question. Before I get to my specific answer, I think that one of the things that I find remarkable about your story, because I think it's consistent across uh, all humanity, is that there is a perspective on yourself that you have, a gift that you have, a talent and interest that is there almost from the time of birth. And as you go along in life, you really reach plateaus where you're able to really live that out, and you come to really sort of a particular point in your life where you say, "Aha." This really is where I have my energy, my strength, my gift. And for me, it really is not a particular hidden sort of talent or wish, but it really is a period in my life, and that was seventh grade. I would have to say. One of the things I discovered in seventh grade that has stuck with me to this day is that because of my intellectual achievement during that period in my life, I was also able to really establish good relationships with people and engage with them in a variety of topics of interest. So that idea of really connecting with people, enjoying relationships, having a diversity around me, and being able to develop those friendships, some more intimate than others, has been sort of a lifelong experience. But there's real power in establishing those relationships, and that is consistent, of course, with the work I do today.
Oh, well, excellent. I absolutely love that story. I think it's nice for us to take moments to really think about how we became powerful. I think we've all been blessed with talents and gifts, and when we can use them to make this world a better place, I think it allows us to really have purpose and meaning in our life. So, Dr. Kelly, we're going to get started with our conversation. One of the questions that I see over and over again is, why do marriages fail?
From the work that I've done over the past 36 years, the underpinnings of the failure of most marriages by far is selfishness. It may manifest itself in other behaviors that may be the topic that will bring people in to me and or may lead them into a court of law for a divorce. But the heart of the real issue is selfishness. And trying to get people to really kind of look at themselves more honestly and the impact that their selfish behavior is having on their marriage and their partner is the challenge of the work that I do.
So, let's break down selfishness, like what you actually mean by that when you say selfishness. Is it selfishness in regards to always putting that person's priorities first? Or how would you define that when you say selfishness?
I would say it's really about putting the priority that that individual has over the care and concern of their spouse. And so it can manifest itself in the finances. It can manifest itself in the time spent at home, really kind of building that partnership to make that home run. It could manifest itself in terms of looking at sacrifices that you would make for your spouse, whether that's a job opportunity to move away, just all a whole myriad of things.
Yes, yes. And I'm sure that when someone is being perceived as being selfish, for example, if I was perceiving my spouse as being selfish, then that could definitely build some resentment in the relationship.
Absolutely. I think that part of what is really critical in marriage is having empathy, being able to experience and understand the perspective of the other person. That's what I mean by empathy. And then I think the other piece of that is self-sacrifice, the opposite of selfishness. That we often come into a marriage or begin to date or establish a relationship because of what that other person makes us feel, how they make us feel about ourselves. And I think what gets lost, especially in Western culture, is that is an important aspect of the relationship, but also another important aspect is your ability to be able to give to that person.
Mm.
And it is not always easy to give. I think the heart and soul of any good marriage is one of self-sacrifice.
Yes, definitely, definitely. As you were talking, I was thinking about how possibly our upbringing may have an impact on the successes or the failures of our marriages, and in particularly our perspective or the models that were demonstrated in regards to things like selfishness or self-sacrifice. What are your thoughts about how significant our upbringing impacts our marriages?
I think it has a tremendous impact that is quite often overlooked. We tend to think of ourselves as this very powerful, individualistic sort of culture, and that is true, but we cannot neglect the impact of our familial history, recent and remote. I think there's something to be said for the impact that trauma can have over several generations. So I think it is really important to look at those models that we grew up with and look at how they impact us. But that's also very difficult to do because it means that you have to look more honestly, not only at those parents who raised and loved you, or those caregivers who raised and hopefully loved you, but also at yourself and how you filtered those experiences and bring them to bear in a relationship.
Is it possible that a person may not even realize that they grew up in a generation that was perpetuating trauma throughout their family life because they just took that as normal? That's normal for what my family experienced and other family members experienced.
That is true statement that I see lived out all the time. That in particular, if I think about families in which drug abuse or alcoholism is present and pervasive, that there's a normality to that sort of addictive family, and there are certain roles that people play, and you adopt those roles and you carry those roles out, and it's and it may not always necessarily be dysfunctional in that family of origin where you're experiencing that trauma or those models that are giving you these dysfunctional patterns of behavior. That may be healthy for you in that setting. The problem comes when you're really stepping outside of that family of origin and really trying to develop a family of creation. That model and those characteristics simply will not work, and you have to be aware of where that is coming from. And it's, again, it's very difficult for us to see ourselves as broken, is the way that I would describe it,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that
even when
really.
it's pointed out to us.
Yes, yes, yes. That really even gets to the point of marriage is that moment when two people become one. And sometimes that union of becoming one can just be so much. I'm just trying to think of an analogy. It's almost like, uh, putting two sparks together, and it's just they just ignite because they're just not quite matching up because his upbringing is so different from my upbringing or vice versa.
That's very true. Now, when I'm talking to groups of singles, and most often it's women, sometimes it's men, mixed group, but what I tell them is if I had sort of a magic world I could create for people who were dating, I would say take a year to get over the romance, to really enjoy the romance. Take another year to really figure out who that other person is, looking at their family, looking at their habits, how they manage their finances, how they deal with their disappointments, hurts, all of those kinds of things. Look very microscopically at their lives and through your experience and through how the experience of how they treat their families. Then take a third year and really work on, can I live with this individual? Can I be equally yoked with this individual? What does that really mean? Because part of what the delusion, I will call it that, a delusion that we have, is that we can go in and change this individual. We will make their lives better. That's part of us feeling our own potency. But it's a very selfish perspective, because what happens when that bubble gets burst? So, but most often when I'm dealing with single, there is a pushback on that, saying 3 years, that's way too long. We live in an immediate society that wants immediate results, and it's only when we confront some of the negative consequences of our desire for immediate results do we have uh, a chance to really kind of have a more open ness to looking at things differently.
Yes, yes. I think you brought up a really great point. There's such power in taking a pause. Sometimes I think our emotions do get the best of us, especially when we're thinking about marrying someone. So I think just pausing and addressing each of those areas is so, so very, very important. So I think you bring up an excellent point there.
One more thing I'll mention in that regard is that one of the major transitions that I try to help patients get to is moving from that romantic love to that conjugal love. And romantic love, of course, we're all familiar with it. It has the erotic component, the feel good component, but that doesn't last forever. And certainly we have heard that. But then what does it mean to have that conjugal love? That's really born out of trust and respect for who the other person is, and trust and respect for them. And so you're living with them in such a way that you're honoring their style and what history they bring to the relationship, and that's difficult because it
Mhm.
requires a great deal of maturity.
Yes, yes, yes. I wanted to get to one other reason of why marriages fail, which really gets to your answer that you discussed in regards to selfishness, is this whole issue of infidelity. And I would say that selfishness is really at the foundation of infidelity. What are your thoughts about the reason why infidelity is such um, a significant reason why marriages fail?
Well, there is certainly there's selfishness is at the root of that, because I tend to look most often at infidelity as a deflection from your responsibility to really clearly address the problems that you are experiencing in the relationship. And so what you do is you pull in an outside person that really is sort of a shield, and of course, that we know that only ends up continuing to wound any possibility of healing in the relationship. So I do see infidelity as the tip of the iceberg in terms of selfishness, but I also see it as a way to cope. When I'm working with couples in affair recovery, there's a whole process to try to put them through to kind of understand what's broken in their relationship that they were not able to really deal with, and then how that led to the affair. Now, the person having the affair clearly has a different set of responsibilities and accountability than the person that didn't have the affair. But there's some brokenness in their relationship that they have to address, and it's really a challenge. to get the person who's having the affair to address it, and a real challenge to get the person who's not having the affair but who's been wounded by the affair to understand some of the dynamics that may be playing out in their relationship with their spouse that may be pushing them away, and then teaching them how to really work through those kinds of issues. It's quite often a long and arduous process if it's successful.
Yes, I like how you use the word recovery because I immediately think about someone who's been wounded or someone who has undergone a surgery or some type of process. And it really is a process to recovery. It's difficult to talk about infidelity without really maybe taking away some pearls about forgiveness for our listeners who are out there who may have experienced infidelity in their relationships. Do you have any pearls about how to learn to forgive in the context of infidelity?
Yes, forgiveness is not just a decision that we make at a particular point in time, but it is also a pattern of behavior that we choose to live out. When I talk with couples about forgiveness as sort of a practical life skill, I talk about not responding to that individual according to how they have wounded you, according to your desire for vengeance. That is what you have to put away. And it's not a one time putting away, it's a repeated putting that away. Now, in return, and this is intimately connected with this whole idea that I propose of forgiveness, the person who has wounded you has to really take full ownership for their wounding. They have to take full responsibility for building back the trust that they have broken and for understanding the pain that they have caused you. When you put both of those together in a concerted effort by both individuals, then it becomes really an opportunity for that relationship to thrive.
Yes, that's going to definitely take some work. That's why they say marriage is work. We hear that all the time.
It is
Marriage is work.
absolutely work. Yes.
Yes. Yes. So we're gonna switch gears just a moment
Mhm.
here, and I've noticed in social media there tends to be this battle going on between what a man needs in a relationship and what a woman needs in a relationship. And if you were to put your spin on it, what are your thoughts? What would you say? What's your 2 cents about what does a man need in a relationship and what does a woman need in a relationship?
Well, I would say, looking at my own life and looking at the lives of those that I work with, I would go with John Eldridge's book, Love and Respect. That it is women most often want love. They want to be embraced and accepted and adored and cared for in the ways that make them feel like there's no way the world can come in and hurt them or do anything. That they have a solid rock on which to lean. Uh, the men most often want respect. They want to feel powerful and potent. There's an ego that's built into masculinity, and of course that can get carried to an extreme. So I'm not talking about the extreme ends of that, but allowing the man to have a leadership role in which he is really considering all aspects of everybody's thoughts, beliefs, values, opinions, his of his spouse or anybody else that's in the family, and really working with that is really important for that man to be able to feel like he is respected as someone who is potent. Men have this need for power, and I don't mean that in a destructive or pejorative sense. I think it really comes down to how we function. And I think if a woman is able to give a man the respect that he should hopefully continuously earn, and that he is able then to be free to give her the love that she so requires in order to feel whole.
Yes, yes. What are some ways that women can take away that respect or disrespect their male partner without realizing it?
Ah. Wow, there are so many ways that that can happen. I think the way that you talk to your husband is if it is in a tone of voice that says you are insignificant, that is a significant blow to that man's ego. And I hear this from men an awful lot. It about 97%. People have to realize 97% of what we communicate has nothing to do with the words we use, but it has to do with the tone of voice, the
Mm.
nonverbal eyes glances that we give, um, and the behaviors that we engage in. So I think if I were to really identify one thing that I see women do, and women use 3 times more words than men, so they are able to outperform men in using their words and using them effectively. And I don't think that necessarily has to be bad, but when I've seen it used bad, it has been to denigrate that man.
Mm. And then on the flip side, how can a man, how can he not demonstrate love without realizing it? He may feel like, hey, you have a roof over your head. You're able to buy clothes when you need to. There's food on the table. I'm showing you that I love you every day. So, are there ways that men can not demonstrate love without realizing it?
And I'll reference here in my response Gary Chapman's book, Love Languages, that for your spouse, you really need to understand what is most important for her in terms of her feeling loved. And, a lot of times it comes in quality time for women. Acts of service would be the two of the top ones that I hear from women most of the time. So, in that context, I would say uh, being indifferent to your spouse would really be kind of the challenge that would make your wife feel not valued.
Yes, yes. I think that leads us to our next question, which really is what is the key to communication? Really, when you start thinking about, what are my husband's needs? What are my wife's needs? At some point, you need to sit down and talk about that or communicate what your needs are. So, if you were to say what are some barriers to communication or what is the real key to effective communication in marriage?
One of the first things I would say is really honesty with yourself, being very clear with yourself what it is that you need. And while that may sound like a very simple, straightforward statement that we all ought to connect with immediately, it is not always that easy to really translate. So I think having a conversation with yourself about what is really troubling you and what it is that you really need in your communication from your spouse is really important. Then I think the second thing that comes up most frequently is being able to listen to your spouse. Quite often, we are preparing our response to whatever the is being said without really taking time to really listen to what our spouse needs. So I often encourage couples clarify, repeat back, paraphrase what your spouse is saying to you to be sure that you understand what they're saying. Because I can't tell you how many times it's come to a place where the spouse says, I said one thing, and the other one is saying, no, you didn't say that. And so there isn't that sort of verification that's going on in the moment. And I think those are two key things that have to happen in communication.
Yes, I think that clarification point is really important. Really trying to rephrase what you thought the other person heard, because then that gives them an opportunity to correct it if you didn't understand properly.
Absolutely. And to listen to that correction. Don't take that correction as an indictment of you, but that correction as really an informing you as to this is what I really need. Because I think sometimes our egos, and I'm going to say this about men more importantly than women, our egos get in the way. And if your spouse, your wife is trying to clarify what it is she's saying, and you take that as an assault on your inability to understand rather than an opportunity and an invitation for you to grasp a better understanding, a deeper understanding, then we get back to the whole thing of selfishness that I talked about, and pride, and really trying to take care of yourself at the expense of the marriage and your spouse.
Wow, these are some great pearls, Dr. Kelly. Great, great pearls. If you're just joining the show, this is Dr. Anthereca Lane, and we are having a conversation with Dr. James Kelly, psychologist. And this is a wonderful opportunity to learn how you can better your relationships or improve your relationships and your marriages. So let's get on to it's difficult to talk to a psychologist without talking about conflict management. I think arguing is probably something that many couples experience. And what would you say is the best way, or yeah, the best way? What would you say would be the best way to manage an argument or some kind of a hot topic in a marriage, a trigger point?
Well, Well, first I will say is that part and parcel of having an intimate relationship is just our disagreements. That should not surprise anyone, although I think it does. The what is not acceptable in those disagreements is our insults and assaults on the other person's character. Um, what I would say is really important is be clear about what it is that you're asking for or that you're debating about, and think, is it really worth the energy I am putting in? Whether and I'm taking a really silly kind of example, but whether my wife wants me to wear a red shirt or a blue shirt, is that something really to argue about? Um, and I think you have to really look at the importance of the topic. I think the other part of really getting through an argument is understanding there must be compromise. That you need to start off in the conflict with trying to understand where it is that you can give. It's really an important topic. Where can you give? How can you give? So that the other person is then invited by your surrendering to them to also surrender and to meet your need or request.
Yes, yes. I think there are two things that I often find helpful in getting back to the power of the pause and pausing a moment and really thinking about what my spouse is saying or upset about. And then the other thought is really taking a moment and really considering that perspective that's being presented and validating the perspective that's being presented. I think that's one thing that I've heard in the past, even from my marriage, is, just the importance of validating that, okay, you have a good point. And that's difficult to do in the heat of the moment, you know?
Mhm. Yes, I think it is. One of the things as we're talking about this topic that really strikes me is I had the great privilege of being trained as a hostage negotiator and a profiler. And many of the things that we're talking about in terms of dealing with conflict and kind of understanding and communication are really the things that you talk about when you're trying to deal with a crisis situation and trying to de escalate. And we all see those kinds of things in the news media with police in terms of how do we de-escalate. Well, sometimes marriages get to that place where they've escalated to the point where there's physical conflict or physical violence. And sort of what we're talking about here is really on point with how do you keep the temperature low and calm
Mm.
so that the issue gets resolved.
Yes, yes. Yes, that art of de-escalation is extremely, extremely important. And sometimes our words, things that we say, our body language can easily take a situation that could have just been at level 2 to level 10 in a matter of seconds. For sure.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts about arguing in front of children? Is that good to do so that they can see how you manage conflict, or should couples try to protect children from examples of conflict in arguing?
I think it is a quintessential mistake to try to protect your children from the arguments that you and your spouse may be having. That is not necessarily a concern of mine. What is a concern is when I see those arguments degenerate into accusations and insults and character assassinations. Children should not be a witness to that because they're learning about how to deal with conflict and disagreements in the way that they see it modeled. So the other piece I would say to having a healthy sort of family relationships in which there's conflict is really having them see you resolve the conflict. And even if they are not present when it's resolved, going back to them and talking with them about how your spouse and you resolved that issue, and sometimes emotions get intense, but that it does not mean that there's not love there. And
Mhm.
so that they have to then begin to build a framework in their head of this is what I should expect. And this is what I should be working for. Sort of those things that we talked about, that lead to divorce. I mean, if you never see your parents argue, how do you know how to argue successfully?
Mhm.
And you never see any conflict resolved, or if you see it resolved badly, you're going to follow that model.
Yes, yes. I remember hearing a psychologist once say that when a child sees conflict and arguing and discord, it makes them feel insecure. Do you have a perspective about that?
I think without helping that child put that in a context,
Mhm.
and that's what the explaining and them being able to understand kind of the process from beginning to end. If they just see the conflict with no resolution, that is an insecurity for them. The other thing that you have to think about developmentally, depending on the age of the child, but younger the child is, the more self-centered they are. So that if something bad happens, mom slips on the floor and falls, but she's okay. A child might say that's my fault because I was angry at mommy because she would not give me the treat that I wanted. And of course that's sort of an overrepresentation, obviously, of a misrepresentation of what's happened. But there is that sort of self-centeredness with children that parents have to be conscious of and really work with as they are engaging with their children.
Yes, yes, definitely. I want us to switch roles and end our conversation a little bit by really recapping, reiterating those keys that make marriage successful. But I'd like to start with how can couples successfully and effectively negotiate roles and responsibilities in a marriage?
I think one of the first steps is really recognizing that one of the reasons you chose the person that you're with is because they have some skills and talents that you do not have. That is the whole part of completing you. So allow them to complete you. Allow them to fit into the role, no matter what society has traditionally established as a male role or a female role. Allow your spouse's expertise to shine. That is what I would say, because then the door becomes open for flexibility and adaptability. None of us know what tomorrow may bring physically or emotionally, for us, and so being able to recognize, understand, and appreciate those talents offers us the widest opportunity to be able to have an adaptable marriage. This union between a man and a woman, is really one in which you're having to really face all kinds of challenges in life that require talents and skills that will take the two. You know, as Ecclesiastes says, two are better than one.
Mhm. Do you do you agree with that statement that marriage is 50-50?
I say marriage is 100.
Yeah.
That if you're only giving 50%, you're not all in. And I think if you're not all in, you're halfway out. And if you're halfway out, the chances of that marriage failing have increased dramatically.
Yes, that's excellent. That's excellent. So let's leave our audience with the picture of what is a successful marriage? I'd like them to leave with kind of their vision board for their marriage. And what would you like to see on the vision board of every marriage so that we can aspire for success?
I would like to see on that vision board unconditional love and acceptance of the other person, not accepting everything that they do, uh, but unconditional acceptance of them, because then that puts you in a position to really work through whatever the issues and problems that they have without rejecting and destroying or assassinating them. One of the things that I know about divorce is that the conflict that led you to the divorce, whatever the trouble, doesn't end once you get divorced,
Mhm.
especially if they're children. You're going to carry that forward into other relationships and or through your children. So I would say that that sort of unconditional sort of acceptance of the individual has to be communicated in depth in every way, while rejecting the difficulties and challenges that may be troubling your relationship. That would be first and foremost. And so it is a real deeper understanding of love. I think the other piece that has to go along with that is we mentioned before is forgiveness. Really not looking to hold a grudge, and that's difficult for humans to do. We cannot forget the woundedness that's happened, but we can live each day if our spouse is really working to recover with how they have wounded us. We can build that trust again, which would be the third piece of really the relationship is having trust, forgiveness, and then developing trust.
Wow, that's excellent. That's excellent. Dr. Kelly, you are, as they say, the bomb. Thank you so much for all of your pearls of wisdom today. I know that we're going to bless our listeners, and it may even spark and ignite them to pick up the book Love and Respect and the five love languages, and so that they can really help and enrich their marriages. Do you have any other resources or final thoughts you'd like to share with everyone?
No, I would just like to say that you know this was the marriage is the toughest relationship that you could possibly involuntarily engage in, one of the toughest, but it's also one of the most rewarding. And it is meant to endure for a lifetime. And there are ways with hard work, with support in your community to make that happen.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you, Dr. James Kelly, for all of your wisdom today. And this has been Dr. Antherica Lane, and we have been having a conversation with Dr. James Kelly, psychologist. We'll see you next time. Wow, this has been another exciting conversation with a very insightful guest, Dr. James Kelly, clinical psychologist. We look forward to having more conversations with him in the future. Special thanks to Marvin Lane, my technical producer, and a special shout out to my Pure Essence TV family, as well as my new family, Stevie B Media Productions. You can listen to this show in podcast form on blogtalkradio.com with Stevie B Media Productions. What a word from the Lord. Well, there you have it. And I look forward to seeing you next time.